Welcome everyone to Legal Leaders Insights, the podcast where today's top legal minds share strategies, stories, and foresight to shape tomorrow's business. Today, I'm delighted to have as our special guest Emerald De Leeuw. Emerald is Global Head of AI Governance and Privacy at Logitech, and is one of the main leaders on AI governance. So I'm really curious of this conversation today. Emerald, welcome, and thanks for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we're getting to do this.
Emerald, I would start as we normally do through your career path. You've been an entrepreneur, now you are in a big corporation. Can you just give us a bit of an outline of your career and what led you to your current role?
Absolutely. So I did take a bit of an unconventional career path, I think. I wrote my master thesis on the GDPR in 2012, 2013. So I had like a solid academic year to get very familiar with the law I then discovered was going to be really important and would change industry.
Yeah.
But I think when I was still sitting in the university, I didn't think that the whole world really understood how big a law this is going to be and how much it would change things for companies, particularly companies outside of Europe, because obviously the directive worked a little bit differently than the GDPR. So rather than joining a law firm after doing my LLM, I said, look, how do I scale what I know? So I started one of the world's first privacy technology companies, which I had in my head everyone needed, and they probably did. But given how long it took for the GDPR actually to come fully into force, what I discovered from building that technology was that what people actually needed at the time was boots on the ground. So apart from raising the capital and building an MVP and doing all of the entrepreneurial things you should be doing, I also did a lot of consultancy, training, things like that. We were in the world of gap analysis and remediation programs. So I ran my own business for the first part of my career. And then in 2019, because you're a very different person in your 30s than when you graduate from college,
Absolutely.
I discovered that it might be time for me to go and actually learn what my customers actually do, because I was obviously selling it to people like me, but I'd never been a chief privacy officer myself. So I joined Logitech as a second privacy hire. And for those of you who don't know, Logitech historically was a hardware company, but is now very much a software enabled hardware company. So our Logitech's needs had changed. I was in the company about 18-ish months and I became Logitech's chief privacy officer, basically tasked with building global compliance with data protection and privacy laws. We built that amazing team around me, hired the whole team, did all the things. And then obviously ChatGPT sort of happened and became mainstream. And we just ran at that. We just said to ourselves, look, this technology is here. Banning it will likely lead to a shadow AI problem. So rather than banning AI and kind of feeling like it wasn't the next big thing, we knew it would be big and we knew we wanted to harness AI. So we decided we want to harness it responsibly. So that turned into setting up an AI governance department, which is also led by me, and building out that whole function now today.
So, as you said, basically, Logitech was initially a hardware company and now is more a software enabler company. What are the main hurdles you had to face in establishing an AI governance framework, which requires to put together a patchwork of different pieces of legislation? It's not just the AI Act, it's not just privacy legislation, there is lots of IP, but lots of trade secrets in a company like yours. So where did you start and where did you end it?
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning and then I'll talk about the legislation piece because I'm very conscious that I'm talking to a leader in a law firm, so can't skip the legislation. But I think if you're in-house, one thing that you learn very quickly is leading with the law first usually doesn't make you super effective. We all know we have to comply with the law, and of course we do that, but that's not really what gets people really thinking. So I really believe that there's a couple of truths that everyone must face, and we chose to face them early. which is the first is the law will never catch up. It's always going to be behind. Trust is gained in drops, but it's lost in buckets. So it only takes one bad thing to happen for the amazing brand that you've spent so many years building to really encounter real harm. And then compliance isn't really leadership. You don't get credit for doing the right thing eventually. So we really learned that we couldn't really wait for the law, and we didn't, right? Because we really believe that absence of a law is not absence of accountability. So that brings me to how we've approached this. We said, why don't we lead with our values first?
Yeah.
Because if you have a set of responsible principles, that's much more memorable than complex legislation, which is your job to know everything about, my job to know everything about. But it's not everyone in the whole company's job to be an expert in all of this. We wanted to give people clear guardrails. So we set up obviously policy around the use and development of AI, but also a set of responsible AI principles. And for us, they are fairness, accountability, transparency, privacy, and security. There's a couple of reasons for that. It gives people a why as to why we're asking them to do all of this stuff. Laws also exist because there's a why behind them. It's not as if the European Commission is just sitting there going, let's create the AI Act because we just want to annoy companies. It's like we're trying to make sure that AI is used for good and that we're guarding against, I guess, more nefarious or high risk applications of AI. So we look at it very much in the same way. We want to make sure that when somebody has to make a decision about something at 2 in the morning, which sometimes does happen, that they have something to guide them as they make those decisions. Now, obviously, the policy and the training and the processes, they all give effect to that legislation. But that has to happen anyway. Whereas those values really give people a reason for why we're asking them to do all of this new stuff beyond just it's the law. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, but how did you create a culture around AI governance? I mean, what the hurdle that most of my clients face is that AI makes your life so much easier. So, in order to convince your colleagues to go through the process and comply with your policies, it takes so much time, and it's much easier just to take out of the internet a free tool, sometimes with your personal email address because you get a free trial, rather than going to the global head of AI governance and asking to have all the process activated. So, at the same time, blocking the usage of these tools can be seen as a sort of threat to the innovation of a company. And in a business like yours that is innovation driven, it's even more complicated to have your colleagues digesting that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And yes, of course, it's not as simple as just giving people a bunch of values. I think there's always a big question around should privacy people lead in this space at all? The answer that I have for that is to an extent, yes, but certain aspects sit in other teams. So that brings me to the point of where you need to get that cross-functional alignment so that people don't see it as something that's being imposed on them, but rather something that they have co-created. So we have an AI governance operations team that has representation not just from legal, but from privacy and AI governance, which is obviously my department, legal in a broad sense, so that's IP, but also cybersecurity, engineering, IT. And together we have a strategy around AI development and deployment. So we make it easy for people to comply with our policies because we have engineering and product people in the company giving our people tools that they can use. So they don't have to go and use their personal email address in like a random tool over here because there's tools that we have said are okay to use in a safe and responsible way inside the company. Of course, not everyone likes that, but I think it's really old-fashioned thinking that you get from some people around, doing the right thing stifles innovation. I think if I had a euro for every time I heard that, I would not be sitting here. I'd be in a hammock in the Bahamas. But I think, realistically speaking, if that were true, that would have been true for the GDPR. And look what has happened. I mean, companies innovate all the time. And I think responsible AI can also really be an asset to your business. I mean, Logitech is a B2B and B2C company, and we sell things like webcams, keyboards, audio equipment.
Sure.
Trust is absolutely critical. So everyone really understands that. So that makes it less onerous. And I think I'll end by saying, I'd love to tell you that it was like this big journey to convince everyone. It really wasn't. Our business model is not to sell ads or um, sell people's information. That's not the business we're in. Logitech historically has often done really difficult things, even if we didn't have to. We've done that with sustainability because we believed it was important, and we still do. And we're doing the same thing now more broadly with responsible AI, responsible innovation in a holistic sense. And I think we've always seen that customers appreciate that.
Yeah. Going back to the EU AI Act, I mean, I assume that a business like yours is using AI both internally and probably in the future in consumer facing, in customers facing solutions. Uh, what do you think will be the major hurdle in complying with the UAI Act for businesses, global businesses like yours? You said that you oversee, I don't know, many countries. So, and these countries are going towards so many different directions, and so, but you need to keep consistency.
And I think you've pointed out like the biggest challenge right now. I think the biggest challenge is not any law in isolation, it's the keeping track of the global landscape. And I think that's also true for privacy and data protection, right? There's just so much going on, and it's this, and there's a lack of harmonization. And that has also been true in data protection and privacy, is like not all countries agree globally on what's important. So we've decided that a lot of the time we are just implementing the highest standard across the board. And that's often, if that is something that you can do, that can be advisable because it makes things a lot easier, because chances that you already comply with a lot of stuff in a different country are quite high if you do it that way. And I think that's really the biggest challenge, is just the massive amount of legislation that's coming out, not just from the EU, but everywhere, and figuring out what the right strategy is for compliance and having the right controls in each country in order to meet those thresholds.
So you are a believer that there's going to be a Brussels effect with the UAI Act, as we've seen, not always with the GDPR?
No, not necessarily. I think we're seeing real diversions right now, right? But particularly if we compare the US and Europe, it's definitely not the same approach. Um, that being said, I often question the Brussels effect a little bit, because we're obviously not the only jurisdiction that will conceive of finding it important to regulate AI. It's not all, but I know Brussels was obviously early, right? But I think machine learning isn't new, right? And to your point, Logitech already has AI products in the market, but there's different ways to approach AI. Not all AI is the same. So I can give you an example of what I think is a really great way of applying AI in a way that actually complies with important security and privacy requirements. Logitech has products that use Edge AI. So we process data locally on the device, which obviously has security and privacy benefits, but at the same time bring that amazing AI technology to our customers in a way that's still trustworthy. So that's very much in a way that I like to look at this, that we can do this in the right way. But yeah, legislation around the world will always be challenging, and I think it keeps it interesting for people like you and me.
Yeah. Last question, Emerald, that we always address to our guests. If you had to give a piece of advice to a young professional that would like to become the global head of AI governance of a multinational company, like in your case, what is the main piece of advice that you would give in setting up the initial path of their career?
That's a really difficult question to answer in a very brief way. So I will break it down into a couple of things that I
Yeah,
think are worth considering. If you want to be a CPO, you need to understand business. You can't just understand law. It's not going to be good enough. You're operating in an organization where at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're enabling business. So making sure you develop business skills is one piece of it. The second piece I would say is make it known what your goals are. There's no point of you sitting in a company and wanting to move up and working hard towards that, and your work is not visible and people don't know what your career goals are. Sure, you make yourself more vulnerable by being honest about what it is you want. At the same time, people can't help you if they don't know what you're trying to achieve. And then the last piece I would say is take a little bit of risk. I took huge risk becoming an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying that that is what everyone should do, and it certainly isn't for everyone. And it wasn't always an amazing journey. It had a lot of ups and downs. At the same time, taking that risk gave me a wide set of skills that are now really useful to me. Because at the end of the day, when I was at Logitech, I was tasked with building something else. And it's not too different from building a company. Building a function requires you to understand business, it requires you to understand budget, it requires you to understand people, process, technology, all of the things that you need to learn in business. So I think those are the things that I would keep an eye on. Don't pigeonhole yourself and make sure that you develop a wide range of skills so you can operate in a business environment.
yeah, that's absolutely good. And I think that is probably the missing point of being always a consultant, as in my case, because well, you understand the business of your clients as they are filtered through the head of legal or the different stakeholders, and so sometimes the weak link is that we don't know how the story ends. So we give the piece of advice and we don't know how the business is going to put it on the ground. Having the perspective on the two sides of the fence is fantastic. And we always try to give business oriented advice, because basically we need to enable the business to do whatever they want, obviously minimizing as much as possible the legal exposure. Emerald, it was fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, and see you next time.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.